Well, good morning. My name is Linda Freed, and I have the honor of welcoming you today and serving as the moderator for today's events, along with Derek Yak and Ching He, who is here, and I will introduce both of them in a few minutes. But first, I'd just like to welcome you to what I think is going to be a very important day. Oh, 2 days, actually. I'm here in this capacity as a member of the World Economic Forum Global Agenda Council on Aging. And as you all are well aware, we have been leading the series of global discussions over the last 9 months or so, starting first in Tokyo, then in London, Toronto, and today in a culminating meeting. With the series focused with global partners on thinking about the intersection of health and wealth in the context of aging, and how to appreciate both the aging of the population and the importance of cognitive changes with aging, with or without disease, in terms of how they might threaten the ability to manage finances successfully. And then to think about, at the intersection of health and the financial services industry, what implications this really burgeoning field might have for how to better serve clients and society together in the face of an aging population. The first meeting that we held was hosted by Atsushi Seiki, who I will introduce a little bit later, in Tokyo, looking at cognitive decline and its economic consequences. The second meeting a few months ago in February was in London, hosted by Jane Voss and her colleagues, and I'll introduce her shortly, on managing aging and cognitive decline, challenges and opportunities for the financial sector. The third meeting just last month in Toronto was on the potential of innovative technologies, and that brings us to today and tomorrow on maintaining economic security in later life. What I'll do is just give you a little bit of overview background before I introduce my colleagues who will join me in framing the day. So obviously, everybody in this room knows that populations are getting older. Here you see in the darker and darker colors of blue the percentage of populations in different countries currently age 60 years and older, and I'd just like to show you how we project that is going to change over time as you go to 2020 and you watch the colors getting darker, 2025, 2030, 2035, 2040, 2045, and 2050. And even where the proportion of the population is not at 25 to 30% or 30% or more, which is the two darkest blues, even in Africa, most countries already are demonstrating increased longevity and rapidly increasing numbers of older adults, even though in a relatively young nation, the proportions haven't shifted dramatically. At the meeting in Tokyo, it was got a snapshot of the personal financial assets that are held by different groups in Japan. And what you can see as you go from top in 2003 to bottom in 2013 over only 10 years, you can see rapid shifts in the predominance of financial assets held by the older age groups, 60 to 69 on the right, and to the right of that, 70 and older. And so the importance of this topic for that country in terms of wealth and financial management is great, and you'll be hearing about that shortly from Dr. Seiki. In the US, we know that the rates of Alzheimer's disease, the absolute numbers of people who are expected to have Alzheimer's disease is very large, anticipated to increase to at least 14 million by 2050. And also in the U.S., about 20% of U.S. households are over 65, and they hold a third of the wealth in the U.S., $18 trillion. And the cost of fraud is also high, estimated to be at least $3 billion for this age group. As some of our meetings have shown, there are interesting twists because both the clients are aging for the financial services industry, and at least some members of the financial services industry report that financial advisors are also aging, with the average age being 51 and some concern about them not being replaced adequately. So what's the import and what's the collision between all of these factors, and how does that, thinking about them in concert, which of course is a very recent event, how does that need to reshape both our thinking and the opportunities and necessities? I'll review a few bits of background data that have been explored at other meetings just so that we have a shared frame. One is, of course, from the London meeting that cognitive abilities change with aging. At least some kinds of cognitive abilities. And some of this is about risk, not about assurance of change, but even when there is no evidence of dementia, even when there is no evidence of mild cognitive impairment, which can be a precursor to dementia, for many people, particularly over the age of 80, there is a change in cognitive abilities in terms of short-term memory and in terms of executive higher level cognitive planning abilities, problem-solving abilities, numeracy and arithmetic skills, and these can underpin a higher risk of financial challenges. At the meeting in London, we heard that financial capacity is about the capacity to manage money and financial assets in ways that meet a person's needs and which are consistent with his or her values and self-interest. And that while there's high variability among people, or because there's such high variability among people with age, where the majority of older people may not be affected by these issues, but some certainly are, it requires a new approach with the sensitivity to be able to handle that variability in the financial services sector. There is, I think, an emerging body of scientific knowledge about the early warning signs of cognitive decline, things like missing key details in documents and having trouble with everyday mathematical complications. These kinds of areas provide insight into perhaps new ways that the financial services sector can actually utilize screening approaches to identify people who are at risk. But at the moment, it's very clear that financial abuse and scams are significant issues for older people and their families. And I think one recognition of that is the increasing attention that a number of groups globally and domestically have been placing on this issue. Certainly our World Economic Forum, Global Agenda Council on Aging, the Gerontological Society of America, with representation here from Jim Appleby, the Institute of Medicine, which had a work project on cognitive aging with a focus on financial decision-making. The World Health Organization report from October of this past year on aging and health, and AARP's Age-Friendly Banking Initiative. The latter initiative has suggested a number of banking services that could be employed to protect older people, and I think the report for that is out in the corridor. But overall, all of this converging knowledge and evidence suggests both a huge need and a huge opportunity for the finance and the broader corporate sector in terms of how we both recognize need and develop innovative approaches that are protective for all sectors and for the individuals who are your clients. One very important point from my point of view is that what we're talking about is a social good, whether we're talking about insurance, which was one focus of discussion at the London meeting, or whether we're talking about the issues of protecting people's financial security and the collective implications of scams and frauds for society. So this is a public good discussion as well as issue of protecting both individuals, families, and the financial services sector. And there is huge opportunity for new technology that can be developed at the intersection, I think, of knowledge and need. Technologies that can benefit people with cognitive declines, that can create new kinds of approaches to recognize risk and be able to identify where the risk resides. But it's going to require new kinds of approaches to design as well so that people can make use of it, even if they're cognitively impaired. We are going to hear right in a few minutes from the people who hosted the meetings previously at 3 previous sites in Tokyo, London, and Toronto. But overarching, emerging from these 3 different meetings are specific recommendations for each sector. I exemplify here the recommendations for government and policy in terms of needing to develop a financial architecture for older age, and to integrate approaches actually across countries. There's recommendations you'll be hearing from the presenters for specific sectors as well. And finally, a great need to invest in research to be able to better understand who's at risk, how to prevent risk from many different perspectives, from the health perspective as well as the financial services sector perspective, and how to build new kinds of approaches to securing and ensuring the ability to meet needs in older age. We've finished this arc of meetings coming into today with recommendations for today's meeting, which I'll summarize briefly. One is that we need to think about all of these issues of risk, not just at a moment in time, the moment somebody is perhaps cognitively impaired, but to learn across the health and financial services sectors to take a life course approach. First, to attending as much as possible to preventing cognitive decline in the first place. Second, to prepare for cognitive impairment and develop, third, approaches that can screen for risk when that cognitive impairment has actually occurred. We need much more investment in research and evidence for solutions around those 3 levels of prevention, detection, and intervention. And to begin to develop a life course approach for clients, individuals, families, as well as all sectors in terms of financial literacy and in terms of understanding cognition and cognitive impairment and how it intersects with the work of every sector and the new kinds of responsibilities for every sector. And how do we think together about formally linking the healthcare and financial services sectors proactively? This series of meetings has been one attempt to build that foundation, but we hope that coming out of the meeting today and tomorrow is a vision about how to keep progressively knitting these 2 sectors together for better understanding and better solutions. So that takes me to the objectives for today's meeting and tomorrow. And our goal is really to build a foundation of shared knowledge that can lead to really substantive dialogue and recommendations around collective actions that would enhance and advance healthy aging, minimize cognitive decline, help us understand the role of technologies such as artificial intelligence and robotics, and the place and position and opportunities for the financial services sector. We hope that coming out of this meeting today and tomorrow will be a set of priority recommendations that the World Economic Forum Global Agenda Council can offer both to the World Economic Forum and its members and globally as we have done in other work, to understand how to both promote healthy aging using technology within the financial services sector and how to build these recommendations into a broader global architecture. And finally, to make recommendations coming out of this meeting as to public and private sector organizations that may be interested in committing together to actions to progress the field of healthy aging and of financial protections in the face of cognitive risk. So